Signore e signori, buonasera. MtMG Guru sta per iniziare. Vi invitiamo a non spegnere cellulari e tablet per condividere idee, spunti e suggestioni con noi. L'hashtag della serata è MeetWilson. Be social, be MtMG Guru.
Buonasera, buonasera a tutti. Grazie.
Good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. The big round of applause is for Bob Wilson here with us first row. This is the heat from Milan. And this is the reason why we're here tonight. We're here to also celebrate your recent birthday. So, Bob Wilson, thank you so much for being here tonight. Okay, just very briefly, because of course I'm going to, leave the stage free for you. And once again, we're really thrilled, actually. And now, if you don't know Meet, this place, just let me tell you that at last we are resuming our meetings with artists and creativity. So Meet is an acronym. It's a project. It's much more than a physical space. It's a project, and it will help us disseminate art at all levels. And it also overlaps with the bright new digital technologies, the new the new media. It's an interesting revolution. We want to understand the more creative, the most, if you will, human, artistic aspect. And we need great artists that can be our points of reference so that we can really understand how to look at the future in a deeper, newer way, in a more aware way, in a very creative, artistic way. So this is the reason why we are here this evening with Bob Wilson. Bob, thank you so much for being here. Together with Franco Lyra. Thank you, Franco, because, this is a dream coming true. Okay, now very briefly, some information on Bob Wilson, on the bio. So just a couple of important things. He's one of the most important artists in the world. In my opinion, he's a total artist because I was impressed by the versatility and then the fact of using tools of your time to do your art. But at the same time, you don't want to lose sight of the classics. The past history, our roots, our traditions. There's no new without old. And Bob Wilson has always, paid attention to the future. So a great creative experience with solid cultural roots, which are very strong. And then once again, there's a list of masterpieces, and then images are so rigorous, impressive, emotionally, let's say, loaded, extraordinary, and once again, he's so versatile. I'm not just talking about the, the Baroque, multifaceted attitude. It's a new, single, unique way to bring you inside a fantastic imagination, and in a very strict, rigorous, very elegant way. So a great artist. So he worked with many other famous artists, Lou Reed, Laurie Anderson, another artist that we have invited here some years ago here in Milan. He also received awards. So once again, total masterpieces. He's a 100% 360-degree artist. So he covers, let's say, the entire spectrum. So if there's an idea, if there's a content, if there's experimentation, there he is. So he managed, to bring imagination forward. And then plenty of awards from the four corners of the world, including the Leone d'Oro, so the Golden Lion at the Biennale in Venice, together with many other awards. He draws, paints, he's a sculptor. He's once again great inspirational artist. In this world, we keep talking about the new, but the new doesn't have to forget the old. So classics, history, the past, and then the explorative, cultivated spirit. Okay, this is it. I'm really so happy to have Bob Wilson here tonight. Thank you so much, Bob.
Ringrazio anche tutte le persone.
By the way, I also would like to thank the audience that we have at the first floor, because the entire building is connected, and then of course we will meet with Bob Wilson at the end of his presentation for a final toast that we would like to celebrate the fact that Bob Wilson is here with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Good evening. The reason I work is to ask questions, and that is to say, what is it? And not to say what something is, for if we know what it is we're doing, there's no reason to do it. The reason to work is to say, what is it? And looking back on my life this evening, the work I did, I think it came about by living life, by walking down a street, things that happened to me accidentally. It wasn't necessarily something that I read in a book or was taught in a formal way with education in schools, but it was experiencing life. I was a very poor student in school, and I had no idea of what I would ever do in my life because I really didn't do anything well. And I was 21 years old and had gone to New York from Texas to study architecture. And I met Martha Graham, the American choreographer and dancer, through a friend of mine who was in her company. And I watched a rehearsal, and after the rehearsal, she said, Mr. Wilson, what do you want to do in life? I said, I have no idea. She said, if you keep working long enough and hard enough, you will find something. And this very simple thing stuck with me through the years. And I've often thought about what Martha Graham said. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. But then finally, maybe something does happen. Graham said in her autobiography, I am a dancer. I learn by practice. I said in an interview half an hour ago, when I was asked a question, that we're always learning. We can be 2 years old and we start to play Mozart on a piano, and you're 82 and you're still learning to play it. So we never really learn anything. But we learn by practice. We learn to walk by walking. You can read books about it, but you've got to stand up on 2 feet and put one foot in front of the other, and you begin to learn to walk. And you learn to walk by falling down. I was walking down the street when I was in my 20s. I was in New Jersey, and I saw a policeman about to hit a black boy over the head with a club. And I grabbed the arm of the policeman and I said, why do you hit this boy? And the policeman said, it's none of your business. And I said, but it is. I'm a responsible citizen. Why do you hit the boy? And to make this long story short, I eventually got to know him. I heard the sounds coming from him and recognized them as that of a deaf person. He had never been to school, and as far as I could tell, knew no words. I thought in words. I thought he was intelligent, perhaps highly intelligent. And it became apparent that he thought in terms of visual signs and signals. He had been tested by a state psychologist and was thought to be uneducable. Eventually, the boy came to live with me, and I became his legal guardian. And the first major work I made in the theater, I made with this very young black boy who knew no words, as far as I could tell. But he understood the world through images. So if he was standing here beside me tonight, he would see you and begin to have a very different understanding of what was happening and being communicated. Not through words, but what he was reading with the body and seeing. When I came to New York, I went to the theater and I didn't like it. I saw Broadway shows and I still don't like them for the most part. And I went to the opera and I like that even less. But I began to look at the dance and I like that very much. And I still do. So my early works in the theater were more related to you might say dance, were visually constructed and were written with this deaf-mute boy who knew no words. I made a play with him that was 7 hours long and silent. And I was invited to show it in France for 2 performances. And Pierre Cardin said, I'd like to invite you to perform it in a large theater for 10 performances. And we ended up playing 5.5 months every night to 2,200 people for a play that was 7 hours long and silent. And much to my surprise, it had a tremendous reception, and people began to ask me to work in the theater. I was asked to do something here in Milano. I was asked to do works in Germany, with the opera, and the Schaubühne, and major theaters throughout Europe. And I said, but I don't know anything about theater. But I did know that when I went to the theater, that it was difficult for me to think. Everything was speeded up, and there was really not time to have my own reflections. And what I was seeing was usually distracting me from listening. So I guess I began to make theatrical works based on what I did not like. I was more interested in, first of all, just to see people as who people are. And if I could make a situation on stage where people could be themselves, then they would have a better relationship with the public. And that's key to someone who's trained as an actor or someone who has no training. Since the meeting of the deaf boy and the hundreds of productions that I've created for the theater, I've always started with silence. I've structured the work visually first. So that what I'm seeing can be as important as what I'm hearing. And I think one of the things I didn't like and still don't like in the theater is that what I'm seeing is theater decoration. Burn the schools of theater decoration. We do not need them. The Lord gave us eyes, and He gave us ears. And what we see, as you all know, can be as important as what we hear. It's not easy to create a work silently, and then later, if you want, to add text, music. So in the long run, in my work, it's not arbitrary, but it's a way of structuring what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. So often that we find in a situation that, let's take in the theater, that what I'm seeing is there to illustrate what I'm hearing. If I take a computer and I put a cell phone on the computer, that's one thing. But if I put a rock on the computer, that's something else. And maybe it's easier to see the rock and the computer together than the cell phone and the computer. So it's not taking just any opposite and putting it together, but there's a structure. So normally in theater, one would start with a text, with a word, with an idea. And later develop a text and words with a stage set, with costumes. You rehearse it, and maybe 2 weeks before you open the production, you light it. I start with light first. Louis Kahn, the American architect, spoke the first week I was in school, and he said, "Students, start with light. Go to a restaurant tonight. Go to an apartment building. You walk in, and the light almost always is an afterthought. The building is built, and then you light it. You had a great architect here in Milano, Gio Ponti, but he thought with light in architecture. Without light, there's no space. Light is what creates a space. Einstein said, "Light is the measure of all things." When I made the opera Einstein on the Beach with Philip Glass, from day one, could we put the cell phone away, please? Excuse me. Yes, you. Can you put your cell phone away? Thank you. From day one, with Einstein on the Beach, my first meeting with Philip Glass, I drew the structure of light for 4 acts. So light was integral to the entire production. It was not an afterthought. It was the first thought. It played an active role. I can turn all the lights out in this room and light this white chair over here and can continue speaking. And in a sense, the light and that white chair become an active participant. In addition to living life, there are things I learned in school. I had one very good teacher, and I learned so much from her, and I'm still thinking about what she did. Her name was Sybil Maholy-Nagy. She was married to the Bauhaus architect, Laszlo Maholy-Nagy. It was a 5-year course in the history of architecture. In the middle of the 3rd year, she said, "Students, you have 3 minutes to design a city. Ready, go. Wow. We had to think at a completely different way, completely different scale. Could I see the whole quickly in 3 minutes? I took out a pencil and a piece of paper. And drew an apple. And inside of the apple, I put a crystal cube. She said, what are you thinking about? I said, I'm thinking about a plan for a city. And the medieval sense, when you had the center of the village was a cathedral. And if you were rich or if you were poor, you could walk in that door. It was a place where, is that me? Where music was performed, painters showed work. It was the highest point in the village. It was the center of the village. Thank you. Oh. In all of the works I've done, whether it was The Ring of Wagner, 17 hours of music, The Life and Times of Joseph Stalin, a 12-hour silent opera, Einstein on the Beach, the opera with Philip Glass, I can tell you in less than 3 minutes what they are. So once we understand the megastructure and can see the big picture, then you can begin to fill it in. So some of the let's take The Life and Times of Joseph Stalin. It was 12 hours. It was in 7 acts. 1 and 7 were related, 2 and 6, 3 and 5. The turning point was in the middle of the 4th act. We spiraled into the 4th act and came to the 7th. So that was about a minute, right? But it was 12 hours long. So I started with this abstract structure. So how could 1 mirror 7? How could 2 mirror 6? How could 3 mirror 5? And what is going to be in the center? It's a classical structure. King Lear of Shakespeare. The first half is in a man-made environment. The second half is in nature. The center is when the king says, I shall go mad. Then he goes into nature. Wagner's Parsifal. It's the kiss of Kundry. It's the center bar of music. Parsifal is the white knight, and in the center with the kiss of Kundry and taking the lance of Klingsor, he says, time becomes space. And he becomes the black knight. People have said that my work is avant-garde. It's actually very traditional in this sense. the form is classical. The avant-garde is rediscovering the classics. And each generation has to rediscover what we're born knowing, and that is the classics. Socrates said the baby is born knowing everything. It's the uncovering of the knowledge that is the learning process. When I made Einstein on the Beach, which was co-commissioned by the Italians, it was in 4 acts, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 acts. The themes A and B, in Act 2, C and A. Act 3 was B and C. And Act 4, A, B, and C together for the first time. They said it was avant-garde. This is a classical structure, theme and variation. It just didn't tell a narrative. It was structured from the beginning with light and a visual book, and later music was added. It's from this that Philip Glass wrote music. When I first came to Paris many years ago, I met a man, and he performed in an early work of mine, and he had a son who was about, I guess, 2 years old. I was invited one evening to his apartment, and there was a globe of the world. And the father was explaining to the boy the map of the world. Here is France. Here is the ocean. Here's Brazil. Here are the mountains. And the boy said, while the father was explaining to him the globe of the world, he said, "Daddy, it's a ball." Looking back on my work this evening, I see that it's really one thing. It's one body of work. And it's changed, but it's still the same body, the same hand. About 10 days ago, I made an exhibition of glass works, quite different from anything I've ever done. And it was shown in Augusta, Georgia. And someone came from Houston, Texas to see the exhibition. And she said to me, "Oh, it's so Bob Wilson." But so I guess the signature is always there. I think this signature has come about by starting with a blank book. I didn't need words on a page. I didn't need illustrations on a page. But you start with a blank book and you begin to fill in the pages. It took me years to learn that. I used to go to rehearsal. I think if I'm not prepared, I won't know what to do. And I realized after some years that I was wasting a lot of time because I had prepared ideas and I was trying to make those ideas happen in a rehearsal room instead of just looking at the people in front of me and let them tell me the direction. Franco and others tried to talk to me tonight about what I should say. I don't think I would have been blocked if I had prepared what I was going to say. I'd rather be here in the room, experience this moment, and let the dialogue begin with a blank book. Well, this is not right for everyone, but it's my way of working. I work a lot in Germany, and it's very difficult because I did Goethe's Faust and many other productions, and I had 4 dramaturgs trying to explain to me Goethe's Faust. And it was so confusing. And finally I just turned off like a radio and said, how can I see this really quick? This Bible of German literature, golden Bible of German literature, Goethe's Faust. What is it? And I started saying, 1, is 2. 2 is 1. Like you have 2 hands, but it's one body. You have 2 sides of your brain, but it's one mind. Heaven and hell are not 2 worlds, but one. And looking back on Goethe's Faust, he wrote a play in 2 parts. The one is more or less a narrative about a man who makes a pact with the devil. And the second part is a long narrative poem. And suddenly you're in ancient Greece or you're somewhere else, you're not sure how you got there. And there are 2 characters in the play, Mephisto and Faust. So I kept thinking they were the same person. 2 is 1. And that very simple ideas helped me then to get through this long, great text of Goethe, Faust. Someone asked me half an hour ago, what are the crises in your life? And the crisis is me standing right in front of you trying to figure out what to say next. The crisis is when your child is learning to tie his shoes. I've talked many times of my friend, the great American soprano, Jessie Norman. Jessie was a very large woman, and she could stand in front of a public with a great presence and power and move people deeply, not just by her singing, but by standing there. I did Winterreise of Schubert with her just after 9/11. And she called me in the morning and said, "Bob, I can't sing tonight." I said, "But Jessie, this is the time we must hear your voice." And she said, "If I sing, I'll cry." I said, "Jessie, please think about it." She called at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She said, "Okay, I'm going to try." Now, in Winterreise of Schubert, there are 24 songs in the cycle. And after the third song, she began to cry. And she stood on stage, the music stopped. And she stood for some minutes until she stopped crying. And then she stood 10 minutes in silence. And the audience began to weep. What she felt deep inside of her, the depth of the emotion deep inside of her, was more moving, more beautiful than when she sang. I was with her in London some years ago, and she was on a talk show. And they said, "Miss Norman, what is your favorite recording?" And she said, without hesitation, "Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream." Thank you.
Non voglio... Grazie veramente.
Bob, thank you. Thank you so much for these very deep words, and I guess you need the headphones. Okay, Bob, thank you so much. That was so touching, so deep. And, these words are a source of inspiration, in my opinion. So they really, really encourage you to have a specific focus or attention to what we experience when we make projects. So once again, we need to look at people, and this is really moving. Now, don't want to take your time for a Q&A session, because I'm sure you have questions or maybe some thoughts you would like to share. Oh, again, this is the Ask Your Question time. Okay, so I'm sure Bob will take questions and share with you answers. Okay, I also have a question, but I can wait till the end. Okay, do we have questions also from the internet, from the network? Because we have plenty of people, over the internet. So once again, okay. Okay, absolutely. Yes, the translation works. You can speak Italian. Sure. Yes. Now, first of all, it's an honor and a pleasure for me to ask you a question. I am an actor. I'm half Chinese, half Italian. I was standing in line before there was a strong event, maybe people against the vaccination, or maybe some, I don't know, maybe some trade union problem. Now, the world is being polarized. So after all of this, difficult time, what do you think about the future of artists? Where can I find beauty in the future?
La voce?
Okay. Well, art is in the nature of man, so it'll always be there. Theaters will always be there. There is a need for man to congregate in forums. It has since ancient times, as it is today. And whether the forum is a football stadium or sitting around a TV or whatever, but there's a necessity for man to express himself. And so is the case throughout history. If we go to the Chinese and we go back 5,000 years ago, what do we look at? Artifacts. If we go to the Romans, if we go to the Egyptians, if we go to the Mayans, centuries ago, what do we see today? Artifacts. So, the chances are, if there is a future, that 5,000 years from now, what artists are doing today will be what remains. Artists are the diaries, journals of our time. And it's inherent in the nature of man. And as I said earlier, that what remains are the classics. These structures that I just drew is classical mathematics. It's the same that you find in your culture in China. We find in the roots from my country, the Native Americans. It's in the music of Mozart. And it's always being rediscovered. But you can't stop that. And politics will always divide men. Religion will always divide men. Read the paper today. Turn the TV on. These are the things that are dividing men. Politics, religion, etc. But art has the possibility to unite us. Now, it's not so easy always. It's like fire. The fire can destroy you, or it can keep you warm.
Prego. Vedo anche dalla sala superiore.
Okay, I guess there are some questions from the room on the first floor. Sorry, I think there's a question here. Okay, these are the messages and the questions from people upstairs. I think we also have some questions from the internet. Yes, so from the net we do have questions, and let me pick one question. Bob, what was your most difficult achievement? So very difficult, but highly satisfactory.
I think getting up this morning, getting my socks on. It's not easy for an old man.
Thank you. Questo signore.
Thank you so much. Okay, another question here in English.
When you started with silence, which was incredibly long, the whole time when you kept on going, and you stopped for a moment, I had and I hope everyone shares this, the terror that you might fall silent again, because the words were so powerful that I just didn't want to stop. Now, I'll go on to my question, but I really wanted to make this known. You've spoken of the classics, and I can speak from many young people here that we do start from those when we can. But how did you find your own justification for your own contribution? It is not only about bringing something forward and, you know, keeping to conserve this magic that we inherit, isn't it? It's also about adding something. But when you're so small, when you're not Socrates, when you're not Plato, when you're not anyone yet, how do you find your justification to say, I will add something, I will say something more? Thank you.
I always work by instinct. So if I had to put this tray with the 5 bottles of water on that table and these drinking glasses, even when I was 2 or 3 years old, I would never place them like that. So I would say, you know, these are 5 bottles, they have to be here, the glasses have to be here. And I don't know, it was just a part of my obsession. I was about 6 years old, and I couldn't sleep. And I woke up in the middle of the night and went to the kitchen in my family home, and I took all the plates and glasses out of the cabinets and put them on the middle of the floor and reorganized everything. These are small plates, these are large plates, these are tall glasses, these are short glasses. And spent several hours reorganizing all the cabinets. And then I went to bed and I could sleep. So I don't know, it's just in my nature.
Grazie.
Okay, please go ahead. Yes, we have another question here. Okay, please introduce yourself. Okay. Okay, Giulia.
Question. And
Sì, bene il microfono perché non si...
sorry, I would like to come back to your concept of structure. I would like to ask you, the structure you're thinking, you're working with, is it in fact a rhythmic structure? I mean, or is it just a visual structure, and how do you transform it into theater by a dynamic?
Guardate, se mi riportate la lavagna foglie mobili, grazie. Quando avevo sempre 5, credo 6 anni, se non vado errato, c'è una cosa che mi diceva sempre mia madre.
So an architect designs a building. Okay. So now we have a building. And this woman lives in the building, and she wants her apartment to look like this. And this man lives in the apartment building and wants his apartment to be like that. And this woman wants her apartment to be like this. So we all can live in the apartment building and design our rooms the way we want. But there's a cohesion because there's a megastructure. So if I start with the megastructure, then I work with people and they begin to fill in the megastructure. Now the form is really not that important. It's how you fill it in. So you see hundreds of young women dancing Giselle. The same steps that were choreographed in the 19th century. But why? Why is there just one of the women that's the most beautiful? She's doing the same steps as all the rest. It's how she feels in the form. How she feels in the form. The form is only a means to get us somewhere else. I just came from Paris. Paris is a beautiful city because it had beautiful architectural plan. So Jean Nouvel, Frank Gehry, architects today can build a building within the city, but there's a cohesion because there's a strong plan. So you start with a megastructure, one of these structures that I drew, and then you begin to fill it in. Without the megastructure, I don't know where to go. But long run, it's the people that fill it in that make it important.
Ancora una domanda, prego.
Okay, one more question. Okay, right here, thank you. Now, do we have questions also from the room upstairs? I know that we also have people in the gallery.
Ask you about the 3-minute drawing, that very intriguing drawing that you made of the city with the apple and the cube in the middle. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I don't know if anybody else also would, probably, and if that influenced any of your theatre designs also.
It influenced my entire life. I mean, but yes, I mean, I just was explaining that's how I made those works in the theater. Can I tell you quickly what is Goethe's Faust? Can I tell you in 1 minute? You know, can I tell you in 1 minute the Ring of Wagner? 17 hours of music. So it's the boy saying to his father, looking at the globe of the world, it's a ball. And then you can see more closely the detail. And I think part of our education is often that it gets fragmented and departmentalized. So that whether it's medicine or science or whatever. So the world is a library.
Bene, io vorrei fare una domanda che...
Okay, I have a question myself, and it goes back to okay, today when we met, we visited together the immersive room with Refik Anadol, who is a digital artist from Turkey. I'd like to know what you think about all of these developments. I mean, evolution, artistic tools, art, digital art. So, is there room for this in your next research, in your next works? Are you going to use these very advanced technologies, for example, artificial intelligence or virtual reality? So in general, what do you think about digital art and digital artists with new tools today?
Well, I think artists will always use the tools of one's time. And that's... So, of course, it'll always be the same thing, whether it's digital or not.
Bene.
Okay. Okay, so maybe we have time for one last question.
fast question. How do you recognize something as a piece of art? So, in other words, what do it is art for you? Simple question.
I've spent 80 years of my life trying to answer that question. What is art? I saw a beautiful puppy, a little dog with a woman sitting on the sidewalk outside of my hotel. And I looked at the face of this puppy dog, and I looked at her face, and I don't know if it was art, but it was a beautiful image.
Bene, io adesso...
Okay, then, Bob, thank you so much. This big round of applause is for you. Thank you so much. This is a hug, okay? This is much more than a round of applause. Okay, then you are all invited to a toast, because this is our own way to celebrate your recent birthday. Okay, waiting for new proposals and new works here in Milan. Also would like to thank Franco. Lyra, Franco, thank you so much for this beautiful gift. I mean, having Bob Wilson here tonight. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to have a toast together. Okay, don't forget we have recorded the entire conference in 2 languages. Thank you. Bye-bye.